So welcome to today's deep dive. And I want to start with a question for you, the listener. What if I told you that the virus that's, making all the global headlines, the one everyone is obsessively tracking, isn't actually the thing that's going to kill you?
Right. It's a completely terrifying paradigm shift.
Yeah. Because, what if the real threat to your life is actually the waiting room you sit in to get tested for that virus?
Exactly. We are so conditioned to fear the spark, but we completely ignore the powder keg we're standing on.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today, we are tearing down the public narrative around pandemic preparedness. The prevailing narrative has this massive lethal blind spot.
It really does.
And we're pulling from a pretty heavy stack of sources today to look into this. We've got the World Health Organization's Global Antibiotic Resistance Surveillance Report, their GLAS 2025 data.
Right, which is sobering all on its own.
Completely. And alongside that, we're looking at critical research from NIH medical journals, the G20 Fe VR report, and this really intense interview with the physicist Brian Cox.
Yeah, that interview really puts things into perspective.
It does. But, anchoring all of this is the life's work of a pioneering physician named Doctor Cardiology M. Srivatsa. We're looking at his patents, his business plans, his writings.
Right.
Because our mission today is to uncover this missing conversation in global health. And then we're going to explore this radical AI-driven, patient-centered solution called the Dr. Maya system.
And we really need to have this conversation now. Because when you look at public discourse around pandemics, whether it's COVID-19 or any emerging threat, the obsession is entirely on the visible causes. The initial virus.
Right. It's all about PCR tests, rapid antigen kits, vaccine timelines.
Exactly.
We see these global surveillance dashboards that look like, military war rooms tracking the spread. But we are almost completely silent on the secondary threats.
We don't talk about the bacterial infections at all.
What do you know? Or the invasive fungi, the parasites, the insect-borne pathogens. Why is the entire global health apparatus so hyper-focused on just the virus?
Well, I think human psychology combined with just, the mechanics of public health messaging naturally gravitates toward the inciting incident.
The shiny new thing.
Right. The virus is the new variable. It's the invader. But if you look at the biological reality of how severe disease and death actually happen, the virus is often just the first domino falling.
Wow, just the first domino.
It's the breach in the wall. The true threat, the actual mechanism of mortality, lies in the chain of events that happens after that breach.
So let's play out how this actually happens in the body.
Yeah.
Because I think people assume the virus itself just, attacks your organs until they stop working.
And sometimes a virus does cause direct viral pneumonia, but more often the chain of events looks like this: the virus enters the body.
Okay.
Your immune system detects it and mounts this massive energy-intensive response. Your body just exhausts its biological resources fighting this viral invader.
Right.
And in doing so, it leaves the doors wide open. Your mucosal barriers in your lungs and throat get damaged, your white blood cells are completely depleted, or they're in a refractory state.
So it's like the security guards are asleep and the front door is completely off the hinges?
Precisely. And that is exactly when bacterial colonization occurs. Bacteria that you just encounter in your environment, or worse, in a highly concentrated hospital setting, they just walk right in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They invade these weakened tissues, which leads to secondary bacterial infections. And because your immune system is already compromised, these bacteria multiply rapidly, and that leads to sepsis.
I want to pause on sepsis for a second because it's a word we hear thrown around a lot. But what is it actually doing biologically?
So sepsis isn't the infection itself. It's the body's extreme, systemic, and highly dysregulated response to an infection.
Okay, so it's the response, not the bug.
Right. The bacterial toxins trigger massive inflammation. Your blood vessels dilate, they become leaky, your blood pressure just plummets.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. Because the pressure drops, oxygen can't reach your vital organs. Your kidneys, your liver, your brain, they start to suffocate and fail. That is sepsis.
Jesus.
And the final, most terrifying link in this chain, the thing that makes sepsis unmanageable, is antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Because if the bacteria causing the sepsis are resistant to our antibiotics,
then the medical system has absolutely no way to stop that cascade.
And if we look at the numbers in these sources, this is not some rare edge case. The data shows that secondary bacterial infections, along with these AMR bacteria and fungi, have crossed a terrifying threshold.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering.
They are now responsible for 42% of severe complications in these outbreak scenarios. 42%.
It's bringing modern healthcare systems to their knees.
Almost half of the severe disease burden is driven by things that aren't even making the evening news.
Right. It forces a complete recalculation of risk. When a hospital system collapses during an outbreak, the public just assumes, oh, the novel virus is that deadly.
When the reality is totally different.
Exactly. The reality, according to the data, is that the system is paralyzed because the ICUs are flooded with patients suffering from secondary bacterial pneumonias and sepsis.
And our standard go-to antibiotics can no longer touch them.
Exactly.
So if someone in your family gets sick during a viral outbreak, your immediate panic is focused on the virus. But the thing that might actually put them on a ventilator is the silent secondary invader.
Right. It's the antibiotic-resistant bacteria waiting on the armrest of the chair in the clinic waiting room.
That is such a massive blind spot.
Yeah.
And to understand how to actually defend against this, we really have to look at the medical establishment through the eyes of someone who spent decades watching this exact failure cascade happen.
Which brings us to the origin story of Dr. Cardiology M. Srivatsa.
Yeah, I was fascinated reading through his background because he isn't just some academic running epidemiological models on a supercomputer, you know?
Not at all. He's been in the absolute trenches.
Right. Since 1983, he's worked in the UK in neonatal intensive care units, the NICU pediatric intensive care units, and critical care environments.
And you really cannot find a more intense crucible of modern medicine than a neonatal or pediatric ICU.
I can't even imagine.
You're dealing with the most vulnerable immune systems imaginable, premature infants, critically ill children intersecting with the most aggressive pathogens.
All while being surrounded by the most invasive medical technology.
Exactly. But the sources explicitly note that Dr. Srivatsa's true value wasn't just his clinical skill, it was his perspective.
Yeah, the text calls him an ecosystem observer. I really love that framing. What does that actually mean practically in an ICU in the 1980s and 90s?
Well, think about a standard clinician. They come in, look at the patient's chart, examine the patient, prescribe a treatment, and move to the next bed.
Right, highly focused on the individual.
Exactly. They are focused entirely on the individual biological unit. But an ecosystem observer zooms out. Dr. Srivatsa was watching the entire machinery of the hospital.
The whole operation.
Yes. He was observing the parents coming in from the outside world, stressed and exhausted. He was watching the nurses administering care, moving from bed to bed.
The human vectors, basically.
Right. He paid attention to the junior doctors making split-second decisions at 3 a.m. under immense fatigue, the senior consultants, the hospital porters moving equipment.
Even the porters.
Even the porters, and the microbiologists isolating pathogens in the lab. He was looking at the hospital as a living, breathing organism.
That makes so much sense, because a hospital is a highly complex biological and social network.
Exactly. A hospital administrator making a budgetary decision to buy a cheaper brand of medical tubing directly impacts the infection rate on the neonatal ward 6 months later.
Wow.
The porter who touches an elevator button and then touches a bed rail, they're part of the infection pathway.
So Dr. Srivatsa saw that you can't solve the problem of infection by only looking at the patient's lungs. You have to look at the entire ecosystem that delivered the bacteria there.
Right. And in 1989, that ecosystem delivered a profound tragedy that just completely altered the trajectory of his life.
Yeah, according to his writings, on December 16th, 1989, a 14-year-old boy, a totally healthy teenager, died under hospital care.
And the official cause of death was recorded as normal commensal sepsis, specifically from a bacteria called Staphylococcus aureus.
Okay, I actually have to stop and push back on this because it just doesn't make logical sense to a layperson.
I know, it sounds contradictory.
Right, because by definition, a commensal bacteria is one that naturally lives on us. We're covered in bacteria. Our microbiome is essential for our survival.
It is.
So how in the world does something categorized as normal and commensal suddenly turn into a lethal, system-destroying form of sepsis in a healthy 14-year-old kid?
It's a brilliant question, and it's the exact question Dr. Srivatsa was asking while the rest of the medical establishment simply filed the paperwork and moved on.
They just accepted it.
Yeah. But you are correct. Staphylococcus aureus lives on the skin, often in the armpits, the groin, and the nasal passages of about 30% of the healthy human population.
It just sits there.
Perfectly peacefully. It's part of the normal flora.
So it's not inherently evil.
No, bacteria don't have morality. They have biological programming, and their programming is to find resources and multiply.
Okay.
The key word here is opportunistic. The skin is an incredibly robust, multi-layered fortress. But what happens when you breach that fortress?
With, like, a medical device?
Exactly. Say an intravenous cannula, an IV line, or an endotracheal breathing tube.
You're literally punching a hole through the fortress wall.
Yes, you're leaving a plastic tunnel connecting the outside world directly to the bloodstream.
Oh, wow.
Or consider a primary viral infection that damages the mucosal linings of the lungs. Suddenly, that harmless Staph aureus neighbor living in the nasal passage gets pushed down into the lungs.
Or it just rides down the outside of an IV needle directly into a vein.
Precisely. And once inside the bloodstream or the deep lung tissue, the environment changes completely. It's no longer a commensal organism competing for space on dry skin.
It's in a nutrient-rich, warm environment.
It realizes it has struck gold.
And its biological programming just shifts into high gear.
It multiplies exponentially. And as it does, it releases powerful toxins. These toxins are what trigger the massive systemic inflammation we call sepsis.
So the healthy 14-year-old boy didn't die because he caught some exotic rare disease?
No, he died because the routine medical interventions used to treat him provided a highway for his own skin bacteria to enter his bloodstream and overwhelm his system.
So the very tools we use to save lives are the vectors for the real killers.
And that realization became Dr. Srivatsa's obsession. From 1989 to 2000, he didn't just write papers. He organized numerous pilot projects and observational studies right there in the hospitals.
Validating hypotheses about infection transmission that other doctors simply weren't looking at.
Exactly. He started meticulously reviewing patient records, cross-referencing diagnostic decisions with patient outcomes.
And what he found was pretty damning.
Wow.
The records revealed alarmingly high rates of diagnostic and treatment errors.
But he didn't just point fingers, He started inventing tangible mechanical solutions to fix the breaches in the fortress.
Right, he looked at the mechanical pathways of infection. Like, he invented this device called the Infifix,
Yes.
which was a specialized, secure holder for endotracheal tubes, the breathing tubes used for infants on ventilators.
Let's explain the how here, because you have to think about the anatomy of a premature infant's trachea.
Okay.
It is incredibly delicate. It's lined with these tiny hair-like structures called cilia that constantly sweep mucus and bacteria upward and out of the lungs.
So that's the natural clearing mechanism.
Exactly. Now, when you tape a standard breathing tube to a baby's face, every time the baby moves or the ventilator shifts, the tube slides slightly in and out of the trachea.
Oh, so it's causing friction.
Severe friction. It damages the cilia, destroying that natural clearing mechanism. Worse, that sliding motion acts like a piston.
A piston.
It actively pumps bacteria from the back of the throat down into the deep lung tissue.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so the Intufix was designed to completely stabilize the tube, eliminating that piston effect and protecting the fragile mucosal lining.
So it prevents the bacteria from ever getting a foothold. He also tackled the IV issue, right? He invented a spring-loaded IV cannula.
Right, because placing an IV in a dehydrated or critically ill patient is difficult. Often, doctors have to make multiple attempts, poking the needle through the skin several times before hitting the vein.
And every single poke pushes more skin bacteria deeper into the tissue.
Exactly. Dr. Srivatsa's spring-loaded device was engineered to make the insertion more precise and successful on the first attempt.
Which drastically reduces the bacterial load introduced to the patient. I mean, this sounds like a massive leap forward in patient safety.
You would think so.
Yeah. You would think the hospital administration and the medical device manufacturers would be throwing a parade in his honor.
Well, the reality of systemic inertia is much darker. Dr. Srivatsa took this safety cannula to the manufacturers. And mind you, the incidence of Staph aureus infections acquired in hospitals had been rising steadily since the 1960s.
Right alongside the explosion in the use of IV cannulas, the correlation was obvious.
And how do you think the corporate manufacturers responded?
I mean, the sources say they pushed back. They outright refused to manufacture the safety device.
And their documented rationale was that an easy-to-use, spring-loaded cannula would, quote, de-skill doctors.
Wait, what? They argued that making a procedure safer for the patient was bad because it would make the doctors less practiced at doing it the hard, dangerous way.
It completely reveals the perverse incentives within the medical industrial complex.
That's insane.
The priority was maintaining the status quo of medical training, preserving existing product manufacturing lines, and protecting profit margins.
Rather than adopting a disruption that would explicitly reduce hospital-acquired infections.
Exactly.
That is maddening. But it really crystallizes exactly who Dr. Srivatsa is. His writings state his motivation very clearly. It was never about fame.
And it was never about massive corporate profit.
Right. His drive was this singular, almost relentless mission. Identify the root causes of these infections, find systemic solutions, prevent the spread, and protect humanity from this looming nightmare of a post-antibiotic era.
And out of that frustration with the mechanical and systemic failures of the hospital ecosystem, he developed a much broader, overarching framework.
Right, because his decades of observations led him to conclude that modern medicine isn't just mechanically flawed. It is operating on a dangerous psychological illusion.
Which brings us to the core philosophy of his entire life's work. And the name of his system, Maya.
Maya. Because in Sanskrit, Maya translates to illusion.
Yes.
But Dr. Srivatsa applies it to a very specific modern phenomenon. It's the deeply ingrained societal illusion that only doctors and only pharmaceutical drugs can save your life.
It is a profound critique of our relationship with our own biology. The Maya system is built on several fundamental principles that attempt to shatter this illusion.
Okay, let's go through those. Principle 1, the human body is inherently designed to heal itself.
Right. The immune system, which has been honed by millions of years of evolution, is the primary engine of recovery.
And principle 2, the role of modern medicine should be to guide, support, and occasionally rescue that natural healing process, not to immediately dominate it with heavy-handed interventions.
And the third principle is the one that really bites. Wrong treatment can be significantly worse than no treatment at all.
Because every intervention has a biological cost.
Exactly.
And the fourth principle focuses squarely on the miracle of antibiotics. The Maya philosophy acknowledges that antibiotics are arguably the greatest discovery in human history.
They are the only truly curative drugs we possess for bacterial infections.
But because they are miracles, we've become addicted to them, or squandering them.
And this squandering creates a vicious psychological cycle that Dr. Srivatsa identifies as masking.
Let's look at how this plays out in a standard clinic every single day during flu season.
Okay. A patient contracts a viral infection. They experience fever, body aches, a severe cough. They feel terrible, they panic, and they go to the doctor demanding a solution.
And the doctor is facing a waiting room of 30 angry patients and fearing a negative review. So they cave to the pressure and prescribe an antibiotic.
Even though, biologically speaking, prescribing an antibiotic for a virus is like shooting a gun at a ghost.
It does absolutely nothing to the virus.
Exactly. The antibiotic cannot touch the virus. So the patient goes home and takes the pills. Over the next 5 to 7 days, the patient's immune system does the grueling work of clearing the viral infection.
The body does the work.
Yes, the patient recovers, but what happens in the patient's mind?
They credit the pill. They think, oh, thank God the doctor gave me that Z-Pack. It knocked that flu right out.
Precisely. The prescription masks the natural healing process. The patient psychologically links their survival to the pharmaceutical intervention.
Which conditions society. Over decades, this has developed a culture of profound dependency on doctors and an expectation for premature, unnecessary prescriptions.
It has.
I want to use an analogy here because we really need to understand the catastrophic biological cost of this masking. Let's upgrade how we think about this.
Not like this analogy.
Because taking an antibiotic for a viral cold is not just harmlessly taking a sugar pill. Imagine your body as a neighborhood. You have a single burglar, the virus, sneaking around breaking windows.
Okay.
Taking a broad-spectrum antibiotic to stop that burglar is like calling in a tactical nuclear strike on the neighborhood.
Right.
The nuke doesn't kill the burglar because the burglar was hiding in the basement. But the nuke absolutely obliterates all the good law-abiding citizens in the neighborhood, your microbiome.
Your gut flora, the good bacteria on your skin, they are wiped out. That is an incredibly accurate way to describe the collateral damage.
And it gets worse. Because inevitably, somewhere in that blasted neighborhood, a couple of highly aggressive, nasty criminals survive the blast. Right. And because they survive, they learn from it. They mutate. They put on radiation suits. The next time you try to use that nuke, it doesn't work on them.
That is antimicrobial resistance. By dropping tactical nukes on viral burglars, we are actively training superbugs.
We are. That is the exact mechanism of selective evolutionary pressure.
And the Maya philosophy is about breaking this cycle of dependency. It's about stopping the deployment of the nukes when they aren't needed. It's about patient empowerment over blind trust.
And if you look at the statistics and the sources, blind trust is getting people killed.
It really is.
Currently, 50% of care is self-care by patients. People manage their own minor illnesses. But because we lack education, 17% of patients delay seeking necessary consultation when symptoms actually transition from mild to severe.
Guess wrong. They wait too long.
Exactly. And that delay leads to a staggering 20% of needless deaths in critical pathways.
And perhaps most disturbingly, the data shows that 13% of deaths in these critical situations are due to wrong diagnosis by the medical system itself.
13% dying because the system guessed wrong or threw the wrong drug at the problem.
Which is why Dr. Maya's goal is to empower the individual to understand exactly what is happening inside their own body.
But to do that, to break the illusion, we have to deeply understand the mechanics of infection. We have to separate the viral burglar from the bacterial fallout.
We really need to demystify the biological sequence.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's walk through the exact sequence of an infection using that unwanted guest analogy.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine your body is your home. Step 1. A virus, the unwanted guest, enters your house. Now, a virus isn't a living cell that eats your food. It's just a string of genetic code.
Right, it doesn't want to burn the house down immediately. It just wants to hijack your kitchen.
Exactly. It wants to use your cellular machinery to make millions of copies of itself.
Then comes step 2. Your immune system, the home security system, detects the break-in. Macrophages and T cells rush to the site of the infection to neutralize the viral copies.
They're destroying the cells that the virus has hijacked.
Yes. And then step 3 is the part we all hate. This is where the symptoms hit.
The fever.
Right. To make the house incredibly inhospitable to the viral guest, your body turns up the thermostat. Your brain signals the body to raise its core temperature.
And you feel bone-tired and fatigued because every ounce of the house's energy is being diverted to power the security system.
And finally, step 4. The massive immune response works. The virus is neutralized and cleared from the system. The guest is gone.
We think the story ends there. We really do.
Yeah.
But here is the critical overlooked phase. The phase the public narrative ignores.
This is the most important part.
After this massive battle, your house is a biological wreck. The mucosal barriers in your lungs are stripped raw. The immune cells are exhausted.
They're entering a refractory state where they are really slow to respond. Your energy reserves are at 0.
This is the moment of maximum vulnerability. This is exactly when the opportunistic bacteria see an open door.
Right. These might be the normally harmless neighbors living on your skin, or they might be highly dangerous pathogens lurking on a hospital bed rail.
Or on the unwashed hands of a healthcare worker.
Exactly. They invade the weakened respiratory tract or the bloodstream.
This is the secondary bacterial infection. And this is where the mild viral illness suddenly turns into a fight for your life. Walk me through the biological mechanism here. How does a bacterial infection actually trigger sepsis and kill you?
Okay, so once the bacteria breach those exhausted defenses, they multiply rapidly. Unlike a virus that hides inside your cells, bacteria multiply in the spaces between your cells.
In your blood and lung fluids.
Yes. As they grow and die, their cell walls break down, or they actively secrete powerful poisons called endotoxins and exotoxins.
And these bacterial toxins just flood into your bloodstream. Where do they go?
They circulate throughout the body, but crucially, they reach the brain, specifically targeting the hypothalamus.
Now, the hypothalamus is essentially the body's central thermostat and master control board, right?
Exactly. The bacterial toxins profoundly disrupt the hypothalamus. The master control board shorts out.
Which leads to what?
It leads to violent rigors, shaking chills, followed by soaring fevers and massive, wild temperature dysregulation.
The body is just losing control.
Yeah. In response to this systemic spread of toxins, the immune system panics. It launches an uncoordinated hyperinflammatory response.
And white blood cells attack the body's own blood vessels.
Right. The vessels become porous and leak fluid into the surrounding tissues.
Which causes the blood pressure to crash.
And without blood pressure, your heart has to beat wildly to try and compensate. Oxygen stops reaching your kidneys, leading to acute kidney injury. It stops reaching your liver.
You enter septic shock.
Yes. Multi-organ failure begins, and death can follow in a matter of hours if broad-spectrum intravenous antibiotics are not administered immediately.
To kill the bacteria and stop the release of toxins.
Right.
Now, I want to circle back to the great misunderstanding we discussed earlier, the masking effect. We know that doctors constantly prescribe antibiotics for viral infections just to appease the patient.
Yes.
But what if the patient actually was at step 4? What if their viral battle was over, their house was wrecked, and a secondary bacterial infection was just starting to take hold in their weakened lungs?
This is a vital, terrifying nuance in the data. Sometimes the antibiotic that was inappropriately prescribed for the viral sniffles actually ends up treating an early-stage secondary bacterial pneumonia that the patient didn't even know they were developing yet.
So the nuke accidentally kills the right burglar.
Exactly. The patient survives. But the psychological misconception deepens dramatically.
Because the patient, and maybe even the clinician, conflates the two completely separate biological events.
Right. Because the symptoms of the viral tail end and the bacterial onset blur together, they firmly believe the antibiotic cured the initial viral illness.
They're like, that pill cured my flu.
Yes. And this incredibly dangerous false correlation reinforces the societal demand for antibiotics for every single viral symptom.
It creates a feedback loop that massively accelerates the global crisis of antimicrobial resistance.
It's a psychological trap that fuels a biological catastrophe.
And if these secondary bacterial infections are the real final killers in these scenarios, we have to look at the environment. We have to ask an incredibly uncomfortable question.
Which is?
If your immune system is exhausted and your biological doors are wide open from a week-long battle with the virus, where is the absolute worst possible place you could physically go?
Ironically, tragically, and statistically, the worst place you can go is the hospital.
Let's look at the data on this because the sources are incredibly clear and, frankly, alarming. I want to dive deep into the World Health Organization's Global Antibiotic Resistance Surveillance Report, the GLAS 2025 report.
It details the rise of the AMR menace in stark numbers.
It really does.
The WHO data confirms what infectious disease specialists have feared for a decade. We are seeing a surging global threat from a specific classification of bacteria known as gram-negative pathogens.
Why gram-negative? What makes them so formidable?
So gram-negative refers to how the bacteria react to a specific laboratory stain. But biologically, it means these bacteria possess a highly complex double-membrane cell wall.
Like a suit of armor.
Exactly. It makes it incredibly difficult for large antibiotic molecules to penetrate. Furthermore, they possess microscopic efflux pumps that literally pump antibiotics back out of the cell before the drug can kill them.
That's terrifying. What are the most dangerous players in this category?
They include Acinetobacter, Klebsiella pneumonia, and Escherichia coli, or E. coli.
And these bacteria are brilliant at sharing information, right?
Yes, they are adept at horizontal gene transfer. If one E. coli bacterium survives an antibiotic, it can pass the genetic blueprint for resistance, a plasmid, to a completely different species of bacteria nearby.
They are crowdsourcing their resistance.
They really are.
Let's put the WHO numbers to this because it's staggering. The global resistance of E. coli to third-generation cephalosporins is sitting at 44.8%.
Yeah.
I need context here. What is a third-generation cephalosporin, and what does it mean that nearly half the E. coli in the world ignores it?
Third-generation cephalosporins are a class of incredibly powerful, broad-spectrum antibiotics. They're often the frontline empiric therapy for severe infections, pneumonias, and sepsis.
Like when someone crashes in the ER and you don't have time to run a 48-hour culture.
Right. You hit them with a third-generation cephalosporin, trusting it will kill almost anything. But the bacteria have evolved to produce enzymes called extended-spectrum beta-lactamases, ESBLs.
What do those do?
They act like molecular scissors, cutting the antibiotic molecule to pieces before it can work.
So a doctor reaches for their best, most reliable weapon, and 45% of the time, globally, it fires a blank.
Yes. And in the African region, the WHO notes that resistance rate skyrockets to 70.7%.
7 out of 10 times the drug fails.
It severely limits a doctor's therapeutic choices. They are forced to rely on more toxic, second-choice drugs or last-resort intravenous treatments like carbapenems or colistin.
And the report notes rising resistance even to those reserve antibiotics, right?
Yes, and often, by the time the lab confirms the first drug didn't work and the doctor switches therapies, the sepsis cascade has advanced past the point of no return.
Meanwhile, MRSA, the methicillin-resistant version of the Staph aureus we discussed earlier, has a global resistance level of 27.1% in bloodstream infections.
And the COVID-19 pandemic acted like gasoline on this AMR fire.
Absolutely. The NIH source data points to a massive global paradox here. In a major study out of Wuhan looking at early COVID-19 pneumonia patients, 71% of the patients were treated with broad-spectrum antibiotics upon admission.
71%.
But the clinical data showed that only 1% of them actually had confirmed bacterial co-infections at the time of admission.
Think about the sheer scale of that biological error.
It's mind-blowing.
You had billions of people globally gripped by the terror of a novel viral pandemic rushing to healthcare centers, and massive percentages of them were receiving broad-spectrum antibiotics they absolutely did not need.
We dropped the tactical nukes on billions of people's microbiomes just in case a bacterial burglar was hiding in the basement.
Exactly. And this created an unfathomable level of selective evolutionary pressure. We essentially turned our global hospital infrastructure and community clinics into high-intensity training camps for superbugs.
We forced the bacteria to evolve to survive our best drugs, all while trying to treat a virus that the drugs couldn't touch anyway.
Right.
And the threat isn't even limited to bacteria. The sources highlight fungal superinfections as a massive blind spot.
Yes, these fungi, like invasive Candida and Aspergillus, aggressively prey on the immunocompromised and the critically ill.
There's a study conducted in a German hospital that showed that 26% of their critically ill COVID-19 patients in the ICU contracted pulmonary aspergillosis.
This is a horrific complication. Aspergillus is a mold spore common in the environment. Normally, a healthy immune system destroys it immediately,
But in a patient whose lungs are ravaged by a virus.
and whose immune system is suppressed by steroids, which was standard protocol for severe COVID, the fungus takes root in the lung tissue.
And what does it do?
It forms fungal balls, invades blood vessels, and causes massive tissue necrosis. The mortality rate is staggering.
Which completely illustrates the concept of the hospital trap. A hospital, particularly during an outbreak, is a concentration of highly infectious, shedding individuals.
And importantly, it is colonized by highly resilient, antimicrobial-resistant organisms. They live on the surfaces, the ventilators, the bed rails, the elevator buttons, and inevitably on the overworked staff.
So when a person with a viral infection, whose immune system is actively exhausted and whose mucosal barriers are damaged, rushes in a panic to a crowded hospital waiting room, they are doing the most dangerous thing possible.
They are walking their vulnerable, open-door biological house directly into a concentrated cloud of the exact resistant superbugs that are most likely to kill them via secondary infection.
We aren't just being dramatic here either. The sources instruct us to look at the facts impartially and to name the experts sounding the alarm, because we are talking about life and death consequences for billions of people who blindly trust the system.
Right.
In a video interview produced by the Francis Crick Institute, the renowned physicist Brian Cox stated plainly that antimicrobial resistance is, quote, equally terrifying to a new virus, and that it has the potential to kill more of us over the coming decades.
And he is simply echoing the hard data compiled by medical researchers cited throughout the NIH literature. Experts like Dr. Misuza, Dr. Henry, and Dr. Lippi have exhaustively documented how bacterial co-infections and hospital-acquired resistant pathogens exponentially multiply the mortality rates of viral outbreaks.
The scientific consensus is glaringly clear. The physical environment designed to save you can, under pandemic conditions, become the very vector for your demise.
It's a harsh reality.
So, if the hospital is the engine of the problem, and if human misdiagnosis fueled by panic is rampant, we are faced with a monumental logistical and medical problem. How do we safely triage patients?
Right. If a mother's child has a 102-degree fever, her instinct is to rush to the ER.
How do we know who desperately needs to stay home in bed and who actually needs an ICU ventilator? This is where Dr. Srivatsa's technological leap, the Dr. Maya system, comes into play.
Dr. Srivatsa recognized a fundamental rule of systems engineering. You cannot solve a systemic bottleneck by simply adding more volume to the bottleneck.
You can't just build more mega hospitals and more ICU beds if the physical act of traveling to the hospital is what spreads the disease and exposes the patient to lethal secondary infections.
You have to intercept the patient before they ever leave their house.
Let's break down the mechanics of how Dr. Maya actually works. At its core, it's an app, but it is designed with brilliant, deliberate, anxiety-reducing simplicity.
Yeah, if you've ever used a traditional online symptom checker, you know the drill.
You type in headache and cough, you answer 20 questions, and the algorithm spits out a list of terrifying potential diseases, usually telling you that you might have a rare brain parasite.
Right, it induces what we call cyberchondria, driving unnecessary panic visits to the ER.
But Dr. Maya disrupts this by limiting the user input. The patient is only allowed to select a maximum of 3 primary symptoms.
Just 3.
Yes, because clinically, the primary cluster of 3 symptoms is almost always enough to categorize the urgency of the condition.
And instead of spitting out complex medical jargon or terrifying disease names, The AI uses a simple, intuitive, color-coded triage system.
The psychology behind the color coding is vital. It bypasses medical anxiety and provides clear instruction. Red means the condition is severe. Seek immediate emergency care.
Yellow means the symptoms are mild, monitor the situation at home, and rest. Green is low concern, you are fine.
But the true innovation for global infection control lies in the blue category.
The blue category is the operational core of the Maya system. Let's play out a scenario. A user inputs 3 symptoms: fever, persistent dry cough, and sudden loss of taste. The AI system analyzes this cluster and strongly suspects a highly infectious viral respiratory illness. It immediately generates a blue alert.
And what does a blue alert explicitly tell the patient to do? Because my instinct is still to go get tested.
A blue alert explicitly commands the patient to isolate at home. It advises them to seek remote telemedicine help or wait for a digital consultation.
So it actively and deliberately prevents them from physically traveling to a clinic.
Yes.
I have to push back here, though. Isn't this a massive legal and ethical liability? You have an AI telling a sick, scared person with a fever to stay home instead of seeing a doctor. What if the AI is wrong? What if they are developing pneumonia?
It's a valid concern, but you have to look at the comparative risk. The blue alert includes monitoring parameters. If the symptoms escalate, if shortness of breath occurs, the status upgrades to red and an ambulance is called.
Okay, so there is a failsafe.
But by keeping that initially stable, highly infectious person at home, you prevent them from entering a public waiting room.
You prevent them from touching the door handles, breathing the recirculated air, and spreading the pathogen to 30 other people,
including the immunocompromised oncology patient sitting in the corner and the healthcare workers who are the backbone of the response.
The risk of the AI being slightly conservative is vastly outweighed by the certainty of hospital transmission if they walk through those doors.
Exactly. It acts as an absolute digital gatekeeper.
And it's important to note that this isn't just a simple, hard-coded if-then decision tree. The documentation heavily emphasizes the integration of advanced AI, specifically referring to Dr. Maya GPT.
It utilizes large language models and multidimensional pattern recognition rather than rigid clinical algorithms.
The distinction between an algorithm and pattern recognition is crucial here, right?
It is. A rigid algorithm says if temperature is greater than 101 and cough is present for 3 days, then prescribe X. It is brittle. It doesn't account for nuance.
But human doctors use pattern recognition. A seasoned clinician looks at the whole picture, how the patient looks, the specific grouping of symptoms, the time of year, the geographic location.
They use medical intuition. By training the AI on massive global data sets of symptom clusters, clinical outcomes, and Dr. Srivatsa's own decades of diagnostic methodologies, Dr. Maya GPT mimics that holistic medical intuition.
But it does so without the cognitive bias, the 3 a.m. fatigue, or the systemic pressure that causes human doctors to make errors.
And the claimed results in the sources are staggering: a 98% diagnostic accuracy rate and an 85% reduction in diagnostic errors compared to standard outpatient care.
98% accuracy.
Yeah.
But Dr. Srivatsa is a realist. He knows you cannot rely purely on the assumption that everyone in the world has a smartphone, data access, and the technological literacy to download and trust an app.
Right, you have to physically meet people where they are in their communities.
And that leads to the physical deployment of this technology, the PRIMA kiosk. PRIMA stands for Personal Responsive Empowering Medical Assistance.
The business plans and patents detailed in our sources outline the deployment of these robust, standalone, AI-powered touchscreen kiosks.
They're designed for deployment across healthcare settings, initially focusing on India due to its massive population density and varied healthcare access. But the architecture is designed for global scale.
Imagine a ruggedized ATM. These kiosks are meant to sit at the absolute front lines of society.
At the entrances of local pharmacies, in rural community centers.
Or right inside the sliding doors of a massive urban hospital before a patient ever reaches the reception desk.
Okay, paint a picture of this for me. A mother walks up with a sick child. The touchscreen interface is intuitive, likely utilizing voice recognition or simple visual icons. She inputs the 3 symptoms.
The AI processes it instantly. If it's a blue alert, the machine instructs her to return home, perhaps dispensing a basic self-care kit or printing a QR code for a telemedicine link.
Let's look at the quantifiable impact metrics from the deployment models, because if this scales, it changes the economics of healthcare entirely. According to the sources, If a standard 100-bed hospital deploys just 3 Prima kiosks at its entrances, the data projects a massive 40% reduction in outpatient department OPD consultation time.
A 40% reduction is transformative. The sources calculate that this saves the attending doctors approximately 20 hours of time every single day.
Because they aren't spending 10 minutes explaining to 30 different people that a viral cold just needs rest and hydration.
Exactly. By effectively filtering out the worried well, the minor viral infections, and the non-urgent cases at the door, you free up the highly trained, exhausted physicians to focus their intense expertise strictly on the red cases.
The severe, complex bacterial pneumonias and traumas that actually require human intervention.
And the infection control metrics are even better. The kiosks are projected to cut nosocomial, meaning hospital-acquired transmission, by 30%.
Because the highly infectious patient interacts with the screen, gets a blue alert, and is routed to an isolation pathway
Right.
before they sit in the main waiting area for 2 hours coughing on the upholstery.
Right. Additionally, the operational efficiency is a lifeline for collapsing systems. The data indicates that one Prima kiosk acts as the operational equivalent of zero point 0.5 full-time equivalent nurses.
It handles the routine queries, the medical reminders, and the basic repetitive triage. In an era where we're facing critical global nursing shortages and massive burnout, automating the front door is essential.
It really is.
But wait, if millions of people, whether on their phones at home or at Prima kiosk in their towns, are typing their symptoms into this AI, you don't just have a triage tool anymore. You've essentially built a global radar for disease, right?
Yes.
The individual triage is only half the genius. Explain the macro view here. How does this data act as a global surveillance net?
This is where the true elegance of the Dr. Maya system emerges. It transitions from a personal healthcare app to a real-time global pandemic prevention network. Every single time a patient inputs their 3 symptoms, the system logs that data. It doesn't need to know your identity, your name, or your medical history. It just needs 3 data points: the geographic location of the ping, the timestamp, and the color-coded symptom cluster.
It's tracking the raw biological signals of the population.
Exactly. By aggregating millions of these color-coded inputs, the AI creates a real-time, high-resolution infectious disease surveillance map.
And it feeds this anonymized data continuously into national public health dashboards. The sources specifically mention integration with systems like the Indian Council of Medical Research dashboard.
Let's play this out. So public health officials are looking at a map of Mumbai or London. Suddenly, the AI flags a dense cluster of blue respiratory alerts, fever, cough, loss of taste, popping up in a specific 3-block radius in real time.
Right. And they see this data days or even weeks before those patients get sick enough to require hospitalization.
They see it long before the laboratories process a single PCR test, and long before traditional lagging surveillance systems detect an anomaly in ICU admissions.
The AI sees the pattern of the smoke before the fire breaches the roof.
It can track localized AMR hotspots or monitor the initial silent spread of a novel virus before it gains the momentum to become a full-blown pandemic.
It flips epidemiology from being reactive counting the dead to being proactive and predictive, driven entirely by the patients themselves.
A complete paradigm shift.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, and we shattered a lot of illusions. So what does this all mean? Let's recap this journey.
We started by uncovering the true hidden menace in global health. The realization that it isn't just the novel viruses we fear, but the lethal biological chain reaction of secondary bacterial infections and the terrifying reality of antimicrobial resistance.
Right. We examined the history and the biology. We looked at how our over-medicalized culture, the illusion of Maya, has conditioned us to demand antibiotics like tactical nukes for every minor viral burglar, masking natural healing, destroying our microbiomes, and actively training the superbugs that now threaten the globe.
We saw how hospitals, designed as sanctuaries, can devolve during a crisis into the very traps that concentrate and spread these resistant pathogens.
And we explored Dr. Srivasa's radical vision, a decentralized, empowered healthcare model. By leveraging simple, color-coded AI systems like Dr. Maya and deploying Prima kiosks at the physical front lines, we can triage patients accurately.
We can keep highly infectious people out of crowded waiting rooms, save thousands of hours of doctor time, and build a real-time global radar for emerging diseases.
It represents a profound, necessary shift from a centralized, reactive, and highly vulnerable medical system to a decentralized, proactive network.
It places the initial critical power of diagnosis, isolation, and surveillance directly into the hands of the individual citizen.
Which brings us entirely back to you, the listener. Your health, the survival of your family, and the resilience of your community is increasingly in your own hands.
Understanding the biological mechanics, knowing the fundamental difference between a viral cold that simply needs time and rest, and a secondary bacterial infection that demands precise medical intervention isn't just an interesting piece of trivia for a dinner party anymore.
No. In a world hurtling toward a post-antibiotic era, where the drugs might not work when you arrive at the ER, that understanding is a vital, non-negotiable survival skill.
Knowing when to trust your body's evolutionary immune system, and perhaps more importantly, knowing when to actively stay away from the concentrated risks of a hospital waiting room might be the single most important medical decision you ever make.
We started today by talking about how the diagnostic landscape of pandemics is murky, unlike a clean black and white X-ray of a broken arm. Dr. Srivatsa and the Maya system are attempting to bring mathematical and biological clarity to that murkiness.
They really are.
But digesting all of this leaves us with a lingering and highly provocative thought. We have spent decades and trillions of dollars building highly centralized, massive mega hospitals. We have worshipped them as the ultimate fortresses designed to save us from the chaos of disease.
But what if we have the architecture of survival entirely wrong?
Exactly. What if the ultimate, impenetrable fortress for surviving the next pandemic isn't a billion-dollar hospital building at all? What if it is simply millions of educated individuals armed with a smartphone, possessing the biological confidence to simply close their front door, stay home, and let their bodies heal? Something to think about. Until next time.